Punjabi kids coming from farming families where the family mortgages their farms to send the kid here for a better opportunity and find them living on the streets, getting addicted to drugs, and sometimes going home in body bags. This is unacceptable. And so we have the worst inflation in a generation. That's now driving up interest rates on heavily indebted Canadians. What does that say about Justin Trudeau if after 8 years as Prime Minister, a third of the nation is too poor to feed itself? The whole country's falling apart after 8 years of Trudeau. But the good news is that life wasn't like this before Trudeau, and it won't be like this after he's gone. Young people being sold to human traffickers, dying of drug overdoses and suicide, living in squalor and under bridges. Well, Justin Trudeau works for Beijing. Let's be blunt about it. He says he admires the basic Chinese communist dictatorship. Media outlet here that was able to compete by attracting willing audiences because of the superior content they provide, now being deleted from the internet. That is the result of his news promotion law. We can't afford Justin Trudeau. He's not worth the cost. If you want more affordable government, you need a common sense conservative.
नमस्कार आदाब सत श्री अकाल हेलो साਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ ਮੈਂ ਹਾਂ ਤਰਨ ਫਰਮ ਹਮਦਰਦ ਟੀਵੀ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਕੁਝ ਪੱਖ ਦੇ ਮੁੱਦਿਆਂ ਬਾਰੇ so we will talk about some issues that Canadians are facing, that Canada is going through. So we have leader of opposition and Conservative Party head Mr. Pierre Poilievre with us in the studio. Welcome to Hamdard TV, sir.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm great. Just back from PEI, and I was just telling you I managed to get the dust on my shoes from picking potatoes out in the PEI potato fields.
So how is your experience?
Well, it was great. The East Coast folks are very friendly, very accommodating, and I encourage everyone to go out there and visit them for a nice Atlantic visit at some point. But a lot of people are suffering on the ground, and I was listening to their stories and trying to provide some hope that we can turn things around.
So if I'll ask you about the current situation of Canada, how you will describe it?
Everything's broken. Look, after 8 years of Trudeau, life costs more to the point where people are skipping meals and suffering malnutrition. 1.5 million people are going to a food bank every month. That's a record smashing number. 1 in 5 Canadians are actually skipping breakfast, lunch, or dinner. We have middle-class people living in their cars because housing costs have doubled after 8 years of Trudeau. There's a nurse who lives in her van. They featured her on CTV the other day. I met a carpenter in Sault Ste. Marie who lives in a parking lot. This is increasingly common after 8 years of Trudeau, and all of this misery is leading to more crime and chaos on our streets. Violent crime is up 40%, shootings are up 101%, and drug overdoses are up 200%. The whole country's falling apart after 8 years of Trudeau. But the good news is that life wasn't like this before Trudeau, and it won't be like this after he's gone.
So we have seen so many protests in the last couple of months. It was never before, as you said.
Yes.
So it could be related to immigration, it could be related to rate of interest, it could be related to many other reasons, could be affordability. So protests are going on days and days and days by days. And today there is another protest by the international students who have just got their offer letters revoked by the colleges. So what would you like to say about the government policies, because everyone is protesting these days in Canada?
People have a right to be angry with their government. Trudeau has imposed terrible misery on the population. He's brought in a 14 cent a litre carbon tax that he now wants to raise up to 61 cents a litre. That's driving up the cost of heat, gas, and groceries, because of course if you tax the farmers who make the food and the truckers who ship the food, you tax all who buy the food. He has inflated the cost of everything by printing $600 billion of new cash, more money. Buying fewer goods equals higher prices. And so we have the worst inflation in a generation. That's now driving up interest rates on heavily indebted Canadians whom Trudeau told that they could borrow without consequence because interest rates were going to stay low forever. But then his deficits drove them higher, and here we are with homeowners who don't know how they're going to make their monthly payments. So people are understandably angry at the enormous damage Trudeau has done, but I tell them again, we can turn this around. We can reverse the policies of Trudeau, axe the carbon tax, cap spending, balance the budget to bring down inflation and interest rates, remove the bureaucracy so we can build more affordable homes so people can put roof overhead again. That's the hope that keeps me going, and that's what I'm going to bring home.
So when you talk about the cuts in the recent statement, Anita Anand told about the $15.4 billion cut in the federal expenses. So what's your thought on this?
Well, it's a fairy tale. You can't believe anything Trudeau says about money. He said he was going to find $3 billion in savings when he took office 8 years ago. So he did a study. He sent his officials around and said, find me $3 billion in savings. And he said after the study was done, he couldn't find one penny of savings. Instead, he found ideas on how to spend even more money. And then he said the deficit would never be bigger than $10 billion. Well, it was $100 billion before we even had our first case of COVID. Then he said the carbon tax would never go over 14 cents a liter. Now he says it's going to go up to 61 cents a liter. You can't believe anything Trudeau says about money or spending. He will never be able to find savings because all he loves to do is build up more bureaucracy, more waste, more handouts, more money printing. We can't afford Justin Trudeau. He's not worth the cost. If you want more affordable government, you need a common sense conservative, Pierre Poilievre, to cut the waste, cap the spending, balance the budget, and bring down inflation and interest rates.
So you already have an economic background, and when we talk about the rate of interest, though the rate of interest is too high, still if we talk about the July's like inflation, it's 3.3. And it has already risen. So what would you like to say as Bank of Canada is surprised, like though there is so much hike in the interest rate, still the inflation is not in the control?
Well, it was entirely predictable. So inflation was slowly starting to come down. And then what happened? Trudeau hiked the carbon tax on April 1st for most of Canada, then on July 1st for Atlantic Canada. He brought in a deficit, another $60 billion of spending. And what do you know? All that money went rushing into the economy to bid up the goods we buy and the interest we pay. And inflation is now back on the rise. So this is entirely predictable. I've been warning the country for 3 years now that if you print money, you get inflation. We've created, so the amount of cash in the economy has gone from 1.8 trillion to 2.4 trillion. In 3 years. That's a 32% increase, during which time our real economy has only grown by 4%. So you grow the money supply by 32% and the economy by 4%. You're growing the amount of money 8 times faster than the amount of goods and services money buys. You're going to get inflation. That's why we need to stop the money printing, balance the budget to bring down inflation and interest rates. And only a common sense conservative like Pierre Poilievre will do that.
They are saying, liberals are saying that they are helping Canadians in this inflation by providing them like child benefits and grocery rebates. So what would you like to say about this thing?
Well, first of all, they say that 11 million Canadians are too poor to feed themselves. That's almost a third of the country. What does that say about Justin Trudeau if after 8 years as Prime Minister, a third of the nation is too poor to feed itself? I mean, it is astonishing that we now live in a country where scurvy is coming back because of the malnutrition people are experiencing, where tent cities are popping up in every town, where 9 in 10 young people believe they will never afford a home. These are new problems. We did not have tent cities before Justin Trudeau. We did not have 9 in 10 people saying they would never afford a home before Justin Trudeau. These are problems he created. And only by getting rid of Trudeau and bringing back common sense can we restore the Canada that we know and love.
When we talk about the affordability, and there is another issue, that is the housing problem. Like,
Yes.
if we talk about the immigration, on the one hand, our immigration minister is saying like we can't build more houses without the help of the new immigrants, and on the other hand, where will we keep that immigrants? In the gymnasium? In where we are going to put them?
I don't think the government has thought of that. So let me give you an incredible fact. We built more homes in 1972 than we built last year. In 1972, we had 22 million people in Canada. Last year, we had 39 million. So with nearly double the population, we're building fewer homes. How can this go on? It's insane to think that we're going to allow our cities to continue to block home building while our population is growing by 1 million people a year. We need to build homes. But the problem is the bureaucracy won't allow the home building to go ahead. It now takes 6-7 years to get a building permit. That adds as much as $1 million to the cost of a newly built home in Vancouver, $350,000 to the cost of a newly built home in Toronto. We have the fewest homes per capita of any country in the G7, even though we have the most land to build on.
Yeah.
How is this possible? In Canada, Toronto's now the worst housing bubble in the world, according to UBS. It didn't even rank 8 years ago on the list of housing bubbles. So Trudeau has doubled the cost of rent, of mortgage payments, and of down payments. That is his record, a 100% increase in the cost of housing. When I was housing minister, housing cost half as much as it does today. That was only 8 years ago. How do we solve it? I'm going to require the cities speed up and lower the cost of building permits. I will demand they permit 15% more home building per year, or I will pull their federal grants. The good news is, if they beat my target of 15%, I'll give them a building bonus to reward good behavior. I'll require every federally funded transit station be pre-permitted for high-density apartments and condos around and on top, so our students and seniors live next to the bus or train. I'm going to sell off 6,000 federal buildings and thousands of acres of federal land so we can build, build, build. That's how we're going to bring homes people can afford.
Especially if we talk about the foreign policy or the foreign relations of China with other countries.
Yes.
We have already discussed before the interview with the China.
Yeah.
On one hand, we are sending our minister to ally with for the climate change like issues, and on the other hand, China is putting Canada out of its travel list. So, what's your opinion on it?
Well, Justin Trudeau works for Beijing. Let's be blunt about it. He says he admires the basic Chinese communist dictatorship. He allows China to interfere in two elections to help him win. He allows Beijing-controlled police stations to operate in plain sight, intimidating the Canadian community of Chinese descent. He now sends his minister to go and work with Beijing on climate change, even though China is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases on the world. Meanwhile, Trudeau attacks our energy industry in this country. He tries to shut down our mines, our pipelines, our natural gas liquefaction facilities, and yet he supports China burning coal and emitting into our atmosphere. We need a prime minister that works for this country, not someone who works for Beijing or for Davos. We need someone who will stand up for this country and be on Team Canada.
Do you accept the conspiracy of foreign interference in Canada's election?
Well, it's not at this point. It's no longer a conspiracy. It's reported by our national intelligence agencies. CSIS has said that China interfered in the 2019 and 2021 elections to help Trudeau win, that they intimidated voters to prevent them from voting Conservative, that they flooded the internet with misinformation, that they targeted Conservative MPs with propaganda campaigns, that they have police stations. A foreign dictatorship has police stations in Canada. Who would have imagined this? This is not me. I'm not alleging this. This is all CSIS findings. But it's so unbelievable that it's happening in our country that it's hard to say it out loud. But this is the record of a prime minister who says he admires the basic Chinese communist dictatorship. We need a prime minister who doesn't admire communism and who will protect our democracy with a full public inquiry into the interference, with a foreign influence registry to expose all those paid actors that manipulate our democracy on behalf of foreign dictators, with criminal sanction for anyone who operates a foreign-controlled police station on Canadian soil. These are the actions that I will take to stand on guard for our country.
You have talked about the social media, and what would you like to say about Bill C-18? There are government-funded channels who have no impact of Bill C-18 on them, but ethnic medias like Hamdard TV, who are having 1.1 million followers on Facebook, they are impacted by this bill. So
Yes.
don't you think so it is just against the ethics of democracy?
Yes, so you're losing, are you being blocked now on Facebook?
Yep.
And were you asking for C-18?
Not at all.
All right, so Justin Trudeau says, get this, I want to talk to the viewer here for a second. So Justin Trudeau said he's passing C-18 to promote news. Well, what has happened since he passed it? News is vanishing from the internet. So we have a media outlet here that was able to compete by attracting willing audiences because of the superior content they provide, now being deleted from the internet. That is the result of his news promotion law. This is insane. Only in Trudeau's Canada will we have news disappearing from social media networks. This is like 1984. A Poilievre-led government will get rid of the censorship that Trudeau has put on our internet and allow the free market of ideas to determine which voices get heard at the loudest by which audiences. You should be free to choose where you get your news rather than having Trudeau and his government commissars decide for you.
This is my last question
Yes.
regarding the immigration. This is the first time in the Canadian history that the international students are going through the pathetic situations. They are doing protests each and every
Yeah.
day. So what would be your immigration strategy? Will you decrease the numbers, increase the numbers, or that will remain the same?
So on international students, we need to root out the fraud that the consultants and the colleges have carried out against students, which have led to young people being sold to human traffickers, dying of drug overdoses and suicide, living in squalor and under bridges. We need to bring in proper enforcement. One, the government needs to ensure that admissions letters are both honest and enforced. If a college says that a student is admitted, they must admit them when they actually get here, rather than saying, no, it turns out we're not going to let them come and study with us. Second, we need to make sure every student has a home. They need to confirm where they're going to live before they come. Otherwise, they're going to be on the streets like we have seen. And third, we need to bring in serious criminal sanction against consultants and others who defraud students by lying to them. We are seeing stories of poor Punjabi kids coming from farming families where the family mortgages their farms to send the kid here for a better opportunity and find them living on the streets, getting addicted to drugs, and sometimes going home in body bags. This is unacceptable. This is not how Canada is supposed to be. This should be a welcoming, safe place. The International Student Program is a great concept because it brings young people here to learn and potentially stay here with the knowledge they've gained. But it needs to be have proper enforcement to protect these kids against the abuse, the dangerous abuse that has been allowed to proliferate under the incompetence and recklessness of Justin Trudeau.
So you are talking about the things that Pierre Poilievre government will do in the future,
Yes.
but what about the strategy for that views? When we come to know about your strategy, how are you going to do all the things?
What do you mean by strategy? To
Like
get
how
to
you
win the
gonna-
election?
How you
or-
gonna do these things? Like about the strategy when you talk about the inflation, how you gonna control it?
Right.
What will be your strategy?
We have to act quickly. So right when I take office, I'm going to axe the carbon tax. It'd be right out of the starting gate. Secondly, we need to immediately impose a dollar-for-dollar law that requires the bureaucracy find $1 of savings for each new dollar of spending. Third, we need to immediately change the funding for cities to link it to the number of homes that get built. Within months, I need to change the infrastructure program so that it is based on the number of housing completions, not bulk transfers of money. No more big fat checks for mayors. They have to get housing built if they want federal money. I'm going to change that condition right at the start so that the cities immediately have to cut back on bureaucracy and speed up permitting. Those are things that are going to happen within weeks of my taking office. Or we're going to have a major. It's going to take 4 years to reverse the massive damage Trudeau has caused. So I need to be fast out of the gate to take action on inflation, housing costs, and crime if we're going to bring it home in my first term.
So, Mr. Pierre Poilievre leads in the polls, and what is your last message to the Canadians who are watching you right now?
Look, I know you're suffering. I know life is miserable in Canada, but the good news is that it wasn't like this before Trudeau, and it won't be like this after he's gone. This is a country of possibility. I was born to a 16-year-old teenage mother who put me up for adoption because she couldn't raise me, but my adoptive parents taught me that in Canada it doesn't matter where you come from or who you know, it matters where you're going and what you can do. That's the country my wife came to as a refugee, and it's the country we want for our kids and yours. And we're going to bring home that country by eliminating the carbon tax and the deficits to lower prices, by clearing the bureaucracy to build more homes, by giving immigrant professionals an opportunity to take a test, prove they're qualified, get to work in their field, by bringing in jail, not bail, for repeat violent criminals, and banning hard drugs rather than giving them out for free so that we can bring our loved ones home drug-free. We're going to rekindle the Canadian dream where anyone who works hard can achieve anything they set their mind to. That's the common sense of the common people, united for our common home. Canada, let's bring it home.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me again. Good to be with you.
So दोस्तों इसी साड़ा खास प्रोग्राम उम्मीद करते हैं ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਸੰਦ ਆਇਆ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਦਿਓ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ। Keep watching Hamdard TV. Thank you.